It's easy to imagine this story in the gospel about the poor widow in a romanticized way. We can see Jesus sitting at a distance with the disciples, and this poor widow coming to the treasury in the temple, maybe with tears in her eyes, and then put those 2 small coins. You could almost hear the violin playing in the background, right? And you could see it, the widow's mite coming to your Hallmark channel this Christmas. It's a sappy story. Sometimes we go to that. But if we go to the deeper meaning of that gospel story, we first need to understand the widows at that time is not the same as we understand widows in our world, in our time, especially in the modern world like where we live here in the United States. At that time in Israel, if you're a widow, if your husband dies, you don't get the property. The property goes to your son. If you don't have a son, it goes to your daughter. If you don't have daughters, then it goes to your deceased husband's brothers. And if he didn't have any brothers, then it goes to the father's brothers, the husband's father's brothers, right? So you never, as a widow, you never get the property. And then we see this in the 2 stories. In the first reading, Elijah met this widow who we didn't hear anybody else living with her other than her young son. There's no mature adult male figure to protect her. The situation is so bad that she says this to Elijah, this is going to be the last day of our life. This is going to be our last meal. And in the gospel story, Jesus said, this poor widow gave all she had, her whole livelihood, meaning that maybe tomorrow she doesn't know what she's going to eat. She probably doesn't know where she's going to live. This is all she had. And as Jesus is teaching his disciples using this example of the widow, in our time too, we can learn from people who can teach us about vulnerability. Because this is more, if we understand the story this way, it's more than just giving more and more to charity, to church. It's more than just being humble, but it's about being vulnerable. In the first part of the gospel, we hear Jesus telling us about the scribes. These are people who have high status, people who have places of honor in the synagogues, in the banquets. But what they do at the same time, they devour the houses of widows. So I can help thinking about the crisis that we have in our church too, where our clergy, our bishops, some of them had caused so much pain, so much suffering to our brothers and sisters in the church. And this doesn't just happen to the church, in the church. With the past 2 years, with the Me Too movement, we hear this is happening in the entertainment industry, among our politicians, in the corporate world. But the pattern is the same. It's the powerful abusing the weak. It's the powerful using the weak. But what we can learn from these people who have been victims, because we keep hearing that it's hard. It is a struggle to be able to come out and tell this story, this painful memory, because the fear of humiliation, the fear of shame, the fear of getting even more repercussions from people who are in power, all kinds. But these people decided to come out anyway and tell their story so that they bring justice to the perpetrators. They decided that this needs to stop. The violence needs to stop right here with me. I'm not going to perpetuate it anymore, turning into oppressors, then, from victims to perpetrators themselves. Or I'm not going to let these perpetrators do the same thing, what they did to me, to other people. That needs to stop here. So we learn about this vulnerability from these people, but we also learn the greatest teacher that we can learn from is Jesus himself. We hear that in the beginning of the song, that Jesus, in St. Paul letters to the Philippians, that Jesus, who is God, did not cling to his status as God, but chose to empty himself and became one of us. Risking, being vulnerable, risking knowing that full well that he's going to be like us, which means he could suffer, he could be in pain, he feels sadness, he could feel humiliation by people, but he chose to do it anyway, out of love. And that's it, out of love for us. So if we can learn that, if we truly call ourselves followers of Christ, Christians, then we need to be vulnerable. And I don't mean that we can let anybody use that we become so meek that everybody can just use us as they want. It takes a lot of guts to be vulnerable. It takes a lot of guts to go out there and say, I can risk everything. I don't care if I lose all my money, all my status, all my privilege, all my resources, all my life. Today's Veterans Day, we have people who have sacrificed their life because of something that we believe in, something that is bigger than us. So that is the lesson from the readings from today. I think for us to be not afraid, to have no fear, to put everything out there, that because we know if we lose everything, anything that we have, that God's grace is enough for us. Amen.